Buying your first plants should feel exciting. But what if I told you that one small mistake, made before you even leave the garden center, could cost you hundreds of dollars and months of disappointment? The good news is that every single one of these mistakes is completely avoidable, and in the next few minutes, you are going to learn exactly how to avoid all of them. Stick around until the end, because the final lesson is a mistake that even experienced gardeners, people who have been doing this for years, still make today. If you learn nothing else from this video, that last lesson alone could save you more money than everything else combined. Gardening is one of the most rewarding hobbies in the world. There is nothing quite like walking outside on a summer morning and seeing flowers you planted with your own hands, buzzing with bees and swaying in the breeze. But here is the truth nobody tells beginners. Most first-time gardeners do not fail because they lack a green thumb. They fail because they buy plants before they understand a few basic principles, and those small gaps in knowledge turn into wasted money and wilted flower beds. This video is going to fix that. We are covering everything you need to know before you ever set foot in a garden center or nursery, from understanding your climate to choosing the right plants for your space, your soil, and your schedule. Every lesson in this video builds on the one before it, so if you skip around, you might miss a detail that saves you real money later. I would recommend watching this one from start to finish, especially if this is your very first flower garden. Before we dive in, I would love to know, what was the very first plant you ever bought? Or what plant are you hoping to buy first? Drop it in the comments below. I will read every single one, and it genuinely helps me know what to cover in future videos. This channel is all about honest, practical gardening advice. No fluff, no overly polished nonsense. Just real talk about what works, what does not work, and how to make your garden the best it can be. If that sounds like something you want more of, please hit the like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a new video. And tap the bell so you get notified every time I post. It really does help this channel grow and help us keep making free gardening content for beginners like you. Now, let us get into it. Lesson 15. Understand your USDA hardiness zone. The very first thing you need to know, before you buy a single plant, is your USDA hardiness zone. This is simply a map of the country, divided into zones, based on the average coldest temperature each area experiences in winter. Here is why this matters so much. Every perennial plant, meaning a plant that comes back year after year, is only rated to survive certain zones. If you plant something rated for a warmer zone than yours, it will likely die the first winter, and you will be left wondering what you did wrong. I have seen so many beginners fall in love with a gorgeous plant at the store, bring it home, and watch it thrive all summer, only to lose it completely once the cold weather hits. It was never a mistake in care. It was a mismatch in climate from the very beginning. Finding your zone takes about 10 seconds. Just search your zip code along with the words hardiness zone, and you will get an instant answer. Garden centers almost always label their plants with a zone range, so once you know your number, you can check it against every tag before you buy. This single habit, checking your zone against the plant tag, will save you more wasted money than almost anything else in this video. But here is where many beginners get into trouble, because zone is only half the picture. The other half is something even more overlooked, and that is sunlight. Lesson 14. Know how much sunlight your garden receives. Almost everyone overlooks this step, and it might be the single most common reason beginner gardens fail. Before you buy anything, you need to know how many hours of direct sunlight your garden spot actually receives. Plant tags usually list light requirements as full sun, partial shade, or full shade. Full sun means at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. Partial shade means around 3 to 6 hours, often filtered or only in the morning or evening. Full shade means less than 3 hours. The mistake I see constantly is someone buying a sun-loving plant, like a coneflower or a zinnia, and placing it under a shady porch or beneath a large tree. The plant might survive for a few weeks, but it will stretch, grow leggy, produce few flowers, and eventually fade away. The fix is simple and free. Spend one full day watching your garden spot. Check it in the morning, midday, and late afternoon, and count roughly how many hours of direct sun actually hit that patch of ground. Write it down, because you will use this number for every future plant purchase. This lesson alone could save you months of frustration, because once you know your light conditions, you can walk into any garden center and instantly rule out plants that would have failed in your space anyway. Lesson 13. Annuals, Biennials, and Perennials. Explained. This next concept confuses almost every beginner gardener, and understanding it will completely change how you shop for flowers. Plants generally fall into three categories: annuals, biennials, and perennials, and each one behaves very differently. An annual completes its entire life cycle in one growing season. It sprouts, blooms, and dies within a single year. Marigolds and zinnias are classic examples, and they are wonderful for beginners because they bloom fast and bloom heavily all summer long. A biennial takes 2 years to complete its cycle, growing leaves the first year and flowering the second year before dying. These are less common in beginner gardens, simply because the wait for blooms can feel discouraging. A perennial comes back year after year, as long as it is planted in the right hardiness zone we talked about earlier. Coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, salvia, coreopsis, Shasta daisies, lavender, catmint, daylilies, hostas, coral bells, bee balm, sedum, and hydrangeas are all popular perennials. Here is the mistake beginners make constantly. They see a garden center full of colorful annuals in the spring, buy an entire cart of them, and then feel confused when nothing comes back the following year. That is not a failure. That is simply how annuals are designed to work. A smart beginner garden usually mixes both. Perennials give you a reliable framework that returns every year, while annuals like marigolds and zinnias fill in gaps with fast, reliable color, while your perennials are establishing themselves. The next mistake costs people far more money, and it has to do with something almost nobody thinks about at the store: plant size. Lesson 12. Understand mature plant size. Here is a scenario that plays out in beginner gardens across the country every single spring. Someone buys a tiny plant in a small pot, imagines it staying that same charming size, and plants it just inches from its neighbors. Fast forward 2 summers, and that same little plant has grown into a massive shrub-like clump, crowding out everything around it, blocking sunlight from smaller plants, and creating a tangled mess instead of the tidy garden they pictured. Every plant tag lists a mature height and width, and this information is just as important as the sunlight and zone requirements. A hydrangea, for example, might start as a small 12-inch plant, but can mature into a shrub 4 to 6 feet wide. The fix here is simple math and a little patience. Before planting, check the mature width listed on the tag, and space your plants according to their full-grown size, not their current nursery pot size. It will look sparse the first year, and that is completely normal. Think of it like seating guests at a dinner table. You would not seat 6 adults at a table meant for 2. Give your plants room to become their full, beautiful, mature selves, and your garden will look intentional and professional instead of overcrowded within a single season. Lesson 11. Understand your soil quality. Soil is the foundation of every successful garden, yet it is one of the most ignored factors by beginners. Plants do not just grow in dirt, they grow in a living ecosystem of nutrients, organic matter, and microorganisms. A quick and inexpensive way to understand your soil is a simple at-home test. Grab a handful of moist soil and squeeze it. If it holds a tight ball and does not crumble at all, you likely have heavy clay soil. If it falls apart instantly and will not hold any shape, you likely have sandy soil. Ideally, it should hold a loose shape and then crumble slightly when poked, which indicates healthy, balanced loam. Clay soil holds water and nutrients well, but can suffocate roots if it does not drain properly. Sandy soil drains quickly, but often does not hold enough moisture or nutrients for thirsty plants. Both can absolutely be improved. The single best budget-friendly fix for almost any soil problem is compost. Mixing a few inches of compost into your existing soil before planting improves drainage in clay soil and improves moisture retention in sandy soil, all while feeding your plants naturally. You do not need to buy an expensive soil testing kit as a beginner, although it can help long-term. Simply improving your soil with compost before you plant anything will solve the majority of problems beginners run into during their very first season. Lesson 10. Understand drainage. Here is a phrase you will see on almost every plant tag: well-drained soil. And if you do not know what that actually means, you could accidentally kill a perfectly healthy plant within days of bringing it home. Well-drained soil simply means water moves through it steadily instead of pooling on the surface or sitting around the roots. Most flowering perennials and annuals despise soggy, waterlogged roots, and this is one of the top causes of plant death in beginner gardens. Here is a simple test you can do before planting anything. Dig a hole about a foot deep, fill it with water, and check back in an hour. If the water has mostly drained away, your drainage is good. If water is still sitting there after several hours, you have a drainage problem to solve first. For garden beds, the fix is usually raising the planting area slightly or mixing in compost and coarse material to loosen dense soil. For containers, the fix is even simpler. Always choose pots with drainage holes in the bottom, because a pot without them is essentially a bucket that will drown your plant's roots. This is especially important for apartment and balcony gardeners, since containers dry out and drain very differently than in ground garden beds. Almost everyone overlooks this detail until it is too late, so check it before you buy your containers, not after. Lesson 9. Know your own watering habits. This next lesson is not really about plants at all. It is about being honest with yourself, because the biggest factor in whether a plant survives is often how consistently you actually water it. Some beginners are natural nurturers who love checking on their garden daily. Others get busy, forget for a week, and then feel guilty finding a wilted plant on the patio. Neither type is wrong, but they need very different plants. If you know you will forget to water regularly, look for drought-tolerant options like sedum, lavender, catmint, or coreopsis, all of which handle inconsistent watering far better than thirsty plants like hydrangeas, which practically demand a drink the moment their soil dries out. A useful shortcut here is grouping plants with similar water needs together in the same bed or container, a practice sometimes called companion planting for water needs. This way, you are not accidentally overwatering your drought-tolerant plants while underwatering the thirsty ones planted right beside them. Be honest about your lifestyle before you shop. A beautiful garden is not the one with the fanciest flowers. It is the one matched perfectly to the person actually taking care of it. Lesson 8. Learn to read plant labels correctly. Every single plant at the garden center comes with a tag, and that tag is essentially a cheat sheet containing almost everything you need to know before buying. Yet most beginners glance at the picture and completely ignore the small print. A proper plant tag will tell you the hardiness zone range, the light requirements such as full sun or partial shade, the mature height and width, the bloom time, and often specific water and soil preferences. Here is a simple habit that will transform your shopping trips. Before placing any plant in your cart, read the tag completely and compare it against the information you already gathered: your zone, your sunlight hours, and your soil type. If a plant tag lists a zone that does not match yours, put it back. If it needs full sun and your spot only gets partial shade, put it back. This might feel restrictive at first, but it is actually the exact opposite. It is how you guarantee success instead of gambling on beautiful packaging. This lesson turns garden shopping from an emotional impulse decision into a confident, informed choice. And confident choices are what separate thriving gardens from disappointing ones. Lesson 7. How to choose healthy plants at the store. Not every plant on the shelf is created equal, even within the exact same variety, and knowing how to spot a healthy plant versus a struggling one can save you from bringing home a problem before it even starts. Start by looking at the leaves. You want rich, even coloring without yellowing, browning, or spotting. A few yellow leaves near the bottom are not a deal breaker, but widespread discoloration is a warning sign. Next, gently slide the plant partway out of its pot if the store allows it. Healthy roots look white or light tan and slightly fill the pot. If you see a dense, tangled mass of roots circling tightly around the edges, that plant is root-bound and will need extra care to recover after planting. Avoid plants that are already blooming heavily in their nursery pot. It sounds counterintuitive, but a plant that has poured all its energy into flowering before it even reaches your garden often struggles to establish strong roots afterward. A plant with healthy foliage and just a few buds will usually settle into your garden far more successfully. I bought the prettiest flower in the garden center once, fully bloomed and gorgeous. It looked perfect for a few weeks and then collapsed entirely. I thought I simply was not good at gardening. In reality, I had chosen a stressed, root-bound plant that never had a real chance. It was never about my skill. It was about that one choice at the store. Lesson 6. Plan your garden before you go shopping. This next mistake is one of the most expensive of all, and it happens before you even leave your house. Walking into a garden center without a plan is like walking into a grocery store hungry with no list. You will leave with far more than you need. Before shopping, sketch a simple layout of your garden space, even if it is just a rough drawing on paper or your phone. Note the sunny spots, the shady spots, and roughly how much space you have available. Decide roughly how many plants you actually need based on their mature size, which we covered earlier, and write that number down. This single piece of paper will keep you from impulse buying 12 gorgeous plants that do not fit anywhere in your yard. A simple beginner-friendly approach is choosing a small handful of reliable perennials, like coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, or salvia, as your framework, and then adding a few annuals like marigolds or zinnias for fast color while everything else establishes. Garden planning does not need to be complicated or professional looking. It just needs to exist. Even a rough sketch will save you money and prevent the overcrowding disaster we talked about earlier with mature plant size. Lesson 5. Understand bloom seasons. Here is a disappointment almost every beginner experiences at least once. You visit the garden center in May, fall in love with everything blooming, plant a beautiful garden, and by July it looks completely empty and green, with no flowers at all. This happens because different plants bloom at different times of the year. Some, like catmint and salvia, bloom early in the season. Others, like bee balm and coneflowers, peak in midsummer. Sedum and some hydrangea varieties often provide color into fall. The fix is choosing a mix of plants with staggered bloom times, so something is always flowering throughout the growing season, instead of one dramatic burst followed by months of plain green foliage. When you are at the store, check the plant tag for bloom time information and try to select a few early bloomers, a few midsummer bloomers, and a few late-season bloomers. This creates what experienced gardeners call constant seasonal interest. This lesson transforms a garden from something that peaks for 3 weeks into something that feels alive and colorful from spring all the way through fall, which is exactly the kind of garden that keeps you excited to walk outside every single day. Lesson 4. Think about pollinators. Here is a surprising fact many beginners do not consider. The flowers you choose do not just affect how your garden looks, they directly affect the bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds in your entire neighborhood. Plants like coneflowers, bee balm, salvia, and black-eyed Susans are absolute magnets for pollinators, and watching butterflies and bees move through a garden you planted yourself is one of the most rewarding parts of this entire hobby. Beyond the beauty, pollinators are essential for a healthy ecosystem, and choosing pollinator-friendly perennials means your small garden is contributing to something much bigger than your own backyard. You do not need to overhaul your entire plan for this. Simply prioritizing a few pollinator-friendly perennials within the framework you already planned adds life, movement, and environmental value to your garden without any extra cost or effort. This is one of those lessons that costs you nothing extra but adds an enormous amount of value, both to your own enjoyment and to the pollinators that depend on gardens just like yours. Lesson 3. Consider maintenance requirements. Every plant requires some level of ongoing care, but not all plants require the same amount, and being honest about how much time you actually want to spend maintaining a garden will determine whether you enjoy this hobby or resent it. Low-maintenance perennials like sedum, coreopsis, catmint, and daylilies generally need minimal fussing once established. Higher-maintenance plants may require regular deadheading, which simply means removing spent flowers to encourage new blooms, along with more frequent watering, pruning, or fertilizing. A common beginner mistake is choosing plants purely based on appearance without asking how much upkeep they require. Roses, for example, are gorgeous, but often demand significant pruning and disease monitoring, which can overwhelm a first-time gardener. If you are a busy homeowner, a beginner apartment gardener, or simply someone who wants a beautiful, low-maintenance garden without a second job's worth of upkeep, lean heavily toward the easier perennials we mentioned earlier, and save the higher maintenance plants for once you have a season or two of confidence under your belt. Matching maintenance level to your actual lifestyle, not your Pinterest board, is what turns gardening into a peaceful, sustainable hobby instead of a chore you eventually give up on. Lesson 2. Choose beginner-friendly plants. By now you understand your zone, your sunlight, your soil, and your maintenance style, which means you are finally ready for the fun part, choosing plants that are actually forgiving enough for a first-time gardener. Coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, salvia, coreopsis, Shasta daisies, lavender, catmint, daylilies, hostas, coral bells, bee balm, and sedum are widely considered some of the most beginner-friendly perennials available because they tolerate a range of conditions and forgive the occasional missed watering. For fast, reliable color while your perennials establish, marigolds and zinnias are excellent beginner-friendly annuals. They germinate quickly, bloom heavily all summer, and are remarkably forgiving of beginner mistakes. On the other hand, plants like delicate roses, finicky tropical varieties, or anything requiring very specific soil pH adjustments can be wonderful additions later, but they often frustrate first-time gardeners who have not yet built confidence in reading their own garden conditions. There is no shame in starting simple. Every experienced gardener you admire started with a few easy, forgiving plants, exactly like these, and built their skills and confidence from there, one season at a time. Lesson 1. The mistake even experienced gardeners still make. Here we are, the final lesson, and I promised you this one at the very beginning of the video, because it is the mistake that even experienced gardeners, people who have been doing this for decades, still make constantly. Buying too many plants at once. Garden centers are designed to be overwhelming in the best possible way, full of color, fragrance, and beautiful displays. It is incredibly easy to walk in for 3 plants and walk out with a full cart, a much lighter wallet, and honestly no clear plan for where any of it will actually go. The problem is not just the money, although that adds up fast. The real problem is that plants bought impulsively often do not match your zone, your sunlight, or your planned layout, which means some of them are destined to struggle no matter how much love you give them. The fix is simple, but it requires discipline. Stick to the plan you sketched out earlier. Buy only what fits your space, your climate, and your lifestyle. If something else catches your eye, take a picture of the tag, note the name, and consider it for your next planting season, instead of an impulse purchase today. Experienced gardeners still fall for this, because the joy of buying plants is genuinely addictive. The difference between them and a beginner is simply that they have learned, often through years of costly mistakes, to slow down and shop with intention. Now you get to skip straight to that wisdom. Let us quickly recap what you now know that most beginners learn the hard way. You understand your hardiness zone, your sunlight conditions, the difference between annuals and perennials, mature plant sizing, soil quality, drainage, your own watering habits, how to read plant labels, how to choose healthy plants, garden planning, bloom seasons, pollinators, maintenance requirements, beginner-friendly plant choices, and finally, the discipline to avoid impulse buying. That is an enormous amount of knowledge, and if you apply even half of it on your very first shopping trip, you are already ahead of most beginner gardeners out there. Gardening rewards patience and preparation far more than it rewards perfection. Now that you know what not to do before buying plants, the next step is knowing exactly which flowers beginners should actually start with, and how to arrange them into a garden that looks intentional from day one. That is exactly what we will explore in another video, so keep an eye out for it. If this video helped you feel more confident about starting your first garden, do me a favor and like it. Subscribe for more beginner gardening tips, and let me know in the comments which of these 15 lessons surprised you the most. I read every comment, and I cannot wait to see what you grow.